Will Mike Zimmer be an upgrade or a downgrade from Dan Quinn? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're continuing our 10 big questions as we inch closer and closer to training camp. And let's talk about Mike Zimmer. I think there's a lot of excitement about Mike Zimmer, Landon, but will he be an upgrade or a downgrade from Dan Quinn?
Yeah, and I think the question even most specifically is this coming season, because I do think that there is a chance that, Zimmer gets the system installed and everything works great. And by, year two, we may not even notice the difference. But I do think it is a difficult needle to thread to try to improve on what was already a pretty good defense under Dan Quinn.
Number one in takeaways over the last 3 years. That's pretty hard to do.
That's pretty hard to do. So obviously there are things that Dan Quinn defense did extremely well. The question is Zimmer going to be able to kind of match that and hopefully beat it at some point? And the even further question is, can he do it on a timeline that actually helps us? Meaning, can he get this done this season? I think there's some pretty big questions that we're going to examine that kind of fall into whether that can happen or not.
Yeah, we're going to talk about, will the pass rush take a step back, but the Cowboys try to emphasize the run game. We'll talk about the secondary, but as a whole, you and I both were really excited about the Mike Zimmer hiring because he is one of the best defensive minds in the NFL, right? And we've seen him be very successful in the NFC very recently, right? And I think his style of defense meshes well with the current talent the Cowboys have. I will say my concern is that they get off to a slow start on defense, and you get to the point where the improvements are coming, but they're coming too late in the season where it doesn't matter enough.
Yeah, and I think that's legitimate, right? Like we talked about the schedule and how seemingly difficult it is, and with some common opponents early in the season against some AFC North teams that have good quarterbacks, and I think really the thing that gives me a little bit of fear is not even so much that Zimmer is the person that's coming in or anything like that. And I do think that we'll talk about the kind of progression of how quickly they can pick up the defense and, exactly the learning curve. And I think that'll be part of our discussion in a bit, but just kind of speaking from a philosophy standpoint, it is a little nerve-wracking in modern NFL football to hear coaches and the ownership and everyone just speaking so much about a new emphasis on stopping the run, right, and a new emphasis on playing the run defense so that you're preventing huge leaks. And look, that's not very scary when you look at the Cowboys defense last year. They gave up a lot of ground on the run, but I think that today's modern NFL is a passing game. And so anytime that there's an emphasis towards the running game, you're emphasizing away from the passing game. And I think that it's necessary, but it is sort of nerve-wracking because, the passing game is what we have all recognized in the modern era is what stirs the drink. So I think that it's a little bit, I think from that point of view, that's not even necessarily related to who Zimmer is. But I think from that kind of, just philosophy switch, it makes me kind of a little bit just because, one of the best things about this team is how they attacked the pass. And we are obviously making a concerted effort to kind of move away from that. And that's a little bit nervy.
I will say, just before I get into my point here, I was very excited about the Mike Zimmer hire. I thought he was the best of the names that were mentioned. However, I am concerned about what year one of Mike Zimmer is going to look like compared to year 3 of Dan Quinn. When you have the same defensive system for 3 years, I mean, a lot of the players, they just don't even need to think about their assignments. They know exactly what to do, right? And I think that's why you saw so many players step up over the last couple of years and play well, because that's the benefit of having the same defensive scheme for the last 3 years. Now, I agree. Like, I think even if Dan Quinn didn't take the Commander's job, I kind of thought it was time for a change anyways. I wonder if they topped out, which is crazy for a team that was number 1 in takeaways over the last 3 years. I felt like it was time for a change, but I am concerned that year 3 of Dan Quinn is just going to be significantly better than what we see in year 1 of Mike Zimmer.
Well, and honestly, in a lot of ways, it's sort of a microcosm for the entire team, right? Like there's this team has been very, very good, and it's hard to move away from very good, right? Even when you're trying to be great, and so I think that's kind of what we're dealing with here is that, you're trying to get a little bit better from where you were with Quinn, and in order to do that, you're going to have to change some things. And when you change some things, you may take a step back. And that is part of, changing systems. And this is kind of what we've talked about before. So, the question now becomes how quickly can they get up and running on this new Zimmer system? Because, and I think Zimmer has even said it, like he's used to coming into situations where the defense is bad, and he's coming in to fix it. And that's not the case this time for him. He's coming into a situation where the defense was pretty good. It just needed to be specifically better at running the football. I mean, stopping the run. And how are you going to do that while maintaining what makes this defense special? I think it's a unique job for Zimmer that he's going to have to do. And it's it may not be as clean as getting done in one offseason. And I think Cowboys fans should prepare themselves for that.
But at the same time, Mike Zimmer signed a 1-year contract, which makes this thing even crazier.
Again, timelines.
Can I give you my tinfoil hat theory here on what's going to happen? I think they signed Mike Zimmer to a 1-year contract with the idea, hey, if we move on from Mike McCarthy, just hang around and see who we hire as the head coach and then make your decision whether you want to be the defensive coordinator or not. Because maybe there's a chance they hire a young hotshot offensive mind, whether it's Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, like you throw your name in there, and we'll keep you on as a defensive coordinator, but we want to let you have an out in case you don't mesh with whoever we hire or whatever we decide to do. I got to believe that even though it's a 1-year contract, I've got to believe the Cowboys are anticipating Zimmer being here beyond just one season.
Well, and I'm sure they also dangled the idea of there's a chance that he could be the head coach. If McCarthy goes, I'm not thrilled about that, but I guarantee you, knowing Jerry and Steven, I'm sure they at least suggested as much in their meetings at some point. So
weren't there rumors that Mike Zimmer worked with Dion at Colorado?
Why do you keep bringing this up? I'm going to stop doing this show with you if you keep bringing this up.
I'm just joking, but I'm just connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. I've got to believe the Cowboys are going to want Zimmer here beyond just 1 year. And they know, like, listen, we know your defense probably isn't going to get solved or fixed or installed all in 1 year. So just give us a little bit of time and we'll look at your contract in the offseason and you can make a decision based on whoever the head coach is.
You also remember that when we got an announcement that Zimmer was the head coach, was the defensive coordinator, weeks before it became official. Right. Like, I mean, it took a long time for them to okay, yeah, let's do this. And then to sign the actual contract to get the contract done. It took a little while. So I'm wondering if there wasn't some kind of back and forth about, what's going on beyond just this year and what happens if Mike McCarthy isn't here and that sort of thing.
All right, let's talk about the pass rush because you kind of referenced this at the beginning. If the Cowboys are really going to emphasize stopping the run, how much will that hurt their pass rush this year? Let's get into that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. Now that the NFL schedule has been released, you can go buy up all the tickets for the Cowboy games. Make sure, the Cowboy fans, you go to all those great road games they're going to have this year in Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Go buy up all those tickets. And with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy events, and theater events near you. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And you can save even more when you choose a section and you let Gametime choose your seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, let's talk about the pass rush. How concerned are you about the pass rush now that the Cowboys are re-emphasizing the run game?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, I think it needs an answer a little bit. I mean, obviously, Zimmer, as we've talked about, kind of prefers these bigger body at defensive ends so that they can, maintain an edge. They can, play the run on all downs if they need to. And so what does that mean for the kind of Micah Parsons of the world, the kind of speed twitchy guys that get around the corner quick? I think that Zimmer has a place for those guys and has shown ways to deploy those guys. But I definitely would expect, an uptick of moving Micah Parsons around a little bit. I mean, I think that he's played a lot of defensive end and at certain points, and they've done some things to kind of move him around in the past. But I imagine that we're going to see less of him kind of isolated as an edge rusher, and more of him kind of moving inside as a blitzer, maybe as a Sam linebacker who's playing next to a defensive end. And still coming after the passer. I think that there's going to be just a lot of variation there. And then on top of that, you're going to have a second kind of bigger body defensive end. And so you'll see more of a D-Law and Nealand kind of package, or a D-Law and Sam Williams kind of package. And maybe Micah's on the field as well, right? So I think, there is going to be a certain amount of needing to manufacture some pass rush, just because, and that doesn't necessarily mean blitzing, but it could mean like twists and stunts and that sort of thing, or at least sim pressures and just kind of bringing people from different spots. And I think that, that can be very effective. Sometimes it may not be necessarily as effective as having four guys who are trying to jet to the quarterback, on every play with coverage behind. So
I was going to say last year, they had a 60% stunt rate on third down, which that was 20% higher than the next team in the NFL. Like, they were using stunts at a ridiculous rate last year. And if you look at like first down and second down stunt rates, by far higher than anybody. Now, the good thing about when you stunt is you can generally create more pass rush, but it also leaves you open to.
It's not gap sound.
You can. And we saw this like in the Packer game, right? You stunt, and all of a sudden there's a massive lane for the running back. Mm-hmm. So they're going to have to create more pressure just by players probably winning their matchups rather than just spamming stunts all the time.
Well, and this kind of brings up another aspect that we kind of need to realize is that Dan Quinn was so far over and beyond the edge of leaning into focusing on the pass, right? It down to, he squeezed everything, he pushed everything he could towards the pass, down to more man coverage, 4 pass rushers, linebackers who are 200 pounds who can cover running backs and tight ends, right? And the stunts, right? Everything is in service of attacking and stopping the pass to the detriment of stopping the run, right? And so I think that when we view this whole situation, this is something that I've been trying to put some context in, is that I don't want people to think that, like, that the Cowboys are going into some, dinosaur land of trying to stop the run and moving away from the future. It's just that Dan Quinn was so far out there that Zimmer is just kind of trying to pull it back to something closer to balanced, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's Dan Quinn for his his benefits, like he did everything he could to try to create more and more pass rush, to try to get more and more pressure on the quarterback. And again, to the detriment at times to the run defense in all sorts of different ways.
Well, as I say, at the same time, and this is why Dan Quinn is a good defensive coordinator, they obliterated bad quarterbacks over the last 3 years. Like you can count on your hands how many times a bad quarterback either beat them or even had a good game, right? They would just load up to create pressure, and then they would create turnovers off of it. The issue is, and this kind of comes back to this whole theme of the Cowboys, is that's great for the regular season, right?
Yeah.
But when you get to the postseason, you're going to be playing better teams with better coaching staffs, with better quarterbacks generally, and you can't always get away with that. And that's the hope with Zimmer, is that his defense maybe is a little bit more practical for playoff success. It's just how much is that going to hurt you during the regular season? Is it going to knock you back so much where you're scrapping to make a playoff spot, or is it going to be good enough that you can still get 10-ish wins and make the playoffs? And then we'll see how it works in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, part of what Zimmer's defense is going to be doing, and we'll talk about, coverages here in a second, is a lot more of trying to confuse the quarterback than, and then make him hold it for a quick second. But the other part of that problem is that you got to make sure the defense isn't confused about what you're doing, because Dan Quinn's defense was very straightforward and kind of had very simple assignments that were easy to follow. I think with Zim's defense, he's going to ask a little bit more of the defenders. He's going to demand that they do it properly and not make mental mistakes. And I think that may be that may cause a little bit of a learning curve early on, especially on the defensive line, right? Where before, it was all go, all Jets, all get upfield, all get through the gaps, go after the quarterback, play the run on your way to the quarterback. And now it's much more of, you may have an assignment on this job. You may be kind of, peeking and doing some two gapping inside or that sort of, or dropping in coverage, So I do think that there is a good chance that ultimately, if things kind of get set into place, that this pass rush is more useful as we get into the postseason, because you'll be able to confuse a quarterback and he won't know where pressure is coming necessarily. But the question is, like, how long does it take for the defense to learn it, to know their assignments inside and out, and not make mental mistakes because they blew an assignment? That's where you have to watch out.
And this is one of my, not a fear, but like concerns, is because the defense was fairly simple last year, and because you were in year 3 of it. I mean, they rotated, I've got to believe, more than any other team in the league when healthy, right? Like how many guys last year played like 400 snaps on defense? It had to be like 17 or 18. I mean, you had 4 safeties that played over 400 snaps last year, right? I wonder if Mike Zimmer isn't going to find like the 14 guys that he really trusts and just kind of ride those guys, and everybody else is just the backups. Now that the good thing is you're not taking your better players off the field as frequently. The bad thing is I wonder if those guys are going to get worn down by the time the end of the season comes around.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe the hope is that you kind of are slow playing some of the second tier guys, and as they kind of learn the system a little better throughout the season, you can start kind of throwing them in a little bit more as the end of the season. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be on a case by case basis, because it's going to be about the kind of individual learning curve for each player, right?
Zimmer's not going to just throw out somebody there because they have athletic upside and potential. Like if you don't know his defense, you're not playing. Now that's a good and bad thing. Like you're just not going to have that many mental mistakes on the field, but you better know the defense or you're not going to see the field. That's going to be something I'm really fascinated to see.
The bellwether really is going to be, the canary in the coal mine for this whole situation is how does Sam Williams do? Right?
Yeah,
because
I agree.
Sam Williams
exactly what I was thinking of.
Sam Williams is kind of the perfect example of an ultra elite athlete, talented guy, but has some mental issues, has some mistake issues. Is he going to be able to keep up with what Zimmer wants and be able to kind of avail himself of this? Or is he going to actually take a step back because he can't even get on the field as much because he keeps blowing assignments?
I wouldn't be surprised. Let's talk about the secondary, because That's the thing I'm most fascinated by is
Yeah.
how does the secondary, which was so productive under Dan Quinn, do with Mike Zimmer? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and in the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Right now, Cowboy fans, if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan, which I'm assuming that you are, they are currently big underdogs in the conference finals against the T-Wolves. I just saw today on FanDuel the T-Wolves are minus 160 to get to the NBA finals. So FanDuel apparently doesn't believe in the Dallas Mavs. So maybe, sprinkle a couple bets on that one. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are discussing the 10 biggest questions going into the 2024 season. And we're talking about, will Mike Zimmer be an upgrade or a downgrade from Dan Quinn? Let's talk about the secondary, because you had, 2021, Trayvon Diggs led the NFL in interceptions, right? 2022, I thought Diggs was actually even better than he was the year before. Deron Bland had a monster rookie season. And then in 2023, when Trayvon Diggs gets injured, all you have is Deron Bland set the NFL record for pick sixes. How concerned are you about the secondary taking a step back this season?
I mean, look, even if Dan Quinn came back, you had to be concerned that the secondary was going to take a step back. I mean, the expectations are ridiculous after that, right? You got Diggs coming back. You've got Deron Bland. I think it's seemingly more and more as every day goes by that it seems like they're not going to bring back Stephon Gilmore. And so if you're going to roll with this group, it's a good group, but the questions that you have about how they're going to take to this Zimmer secondary it kind of is broken down individually, right? So let's start with Trayvon. I think Trayvon is a very natural fit here. We've talked about the fact that his history in a Saban defense, he understands the kind of coverage concepts, the man match, zone match kind of concepts that they probably will be playing. He understands how to play a variety of different kind of traditional country zone drops, whether it's cover 3, cover 2, cover 1, or he understands the cover 6s and all the kind of split field coverages that go on in those coverage systems. So that for him, Diggs is one of the actual few players in the secondary I'm not very concerned about. I think he's going to fit in fine, and muscle memory will play its way out. Jordan Lewis is a veteran corner who has played in a couple of different systems. He's played at Michigan, so he has experience playing in a couple of different of these.
I think he's going to be great in this defense, to be honest.
I don't think there's going to be any problem there. I think he's a heady player. I think he's a smart player, and I think he will digest this very well. And I think, honestly, that Zimmer's going to absolutely love Jordan Lewis. And,
I agree.
He's going to be one of his guys for sure. Deron Bland is honestly where I have my concerns. And not because I think Deron Bland has any deficiency or anything like that, but it's just more that Deron Bland was a guy that, coming out of Fresno, he played a ton of man coverage. And what does he do when he comes into the NFL? He plays a ton of man coverage, and it's a very smooth transition for him. And everyone kind of acted, surprised that he was incredible. I mean, all of us should have been surprised, but I think looking back now, I think it's a pretty simple transition when the guy had been doing so well in college, which that's the anomaly, right? Is that you don't see a ton of teams that play a bunch of man coverage in college football. It's just not as common, right? So the fact that you got a guy in here that had a lot of experience with that, it's just an unknown, right? Because we just haven't seen him play a ton of coverages outside of what the Dan Quinn system or what he did at Fresno. So I think that, that's really where I have my concerns, is how is he going to take to some of these, more complicated zone coverages, the match stuff, is it going to become second nature for him? Is he still going to have the instincts that make him special, and make him able to kind of turn around, find the ball and intercept it the way he did previously? Or is this going to kind of cause, issues? Is he going to feel uncomfortable? Is he going to feel out of place in some of these coverages? I think that's the real big question. And then I think obviously some of these down roster guys too. I mean, there's just a lot of unknown with some of these guys. I think, some of the guys that Zimmer drafted, you feel like maybe, but at the same time, even for Zimmer, when he was with Minnesota, like those corners took a long time to see the field or at least see the field properly.
Even
right?
first round picks sometimes
right.
were redshirted. So
that's right. So Zimmer's like notorious for that. Zimmer, for those who don't know, Zimmer is a secondary coach. Like that's his background. So he obviously has very specific thoughts on how that position should be played. So I think that, I have all the faith in Deron Bland. He's an incredible athlete, but I do wonder if there isn't a little bit of a learning curve for him as he kind of gets used to all these different calls and kind of just different situations that he hasn't necessarily had to deal with too much so far in his early NFL career.
I think the safeties are going to be fine. I actually think Donovan Wilson's going to be great in this defense as long as he can stay healthy. I think Malik Hooker fits just about any defense as long as he's healthy. We'll see on Wanye Thomas and Marquise Bell and Izzy Mukamu how those three guys fit in. I
think Wanye fits fine. I mean, because he's so athletic. I think he could play both spots just fine. Bell, it's like
I'm gonna guess Bell just ends up being Donovan Wilson's primary backup.
Probably.
If I had to bet. And then Izzy Mukamu, I have no idea.
Listen, I would love for them to find some more ways to get Izzy Mukamu to play some more slot corner. Because I just think it's hard to operate around a big, long-armed corner in the slot, right? It's just he shuts down passing lanes, especially in zone drops and stuff. I think it would make a lot of sense. So I just hope they find a role for Izzy that allows him to get on the field because he deserves it. He's
a good player. He needs to play,
man. And and the funny thing is again, it doesn't seem to really matter where they deploy him at. Whenever he gets on the field, he plays well. So let's just find a spot for him, get him into a rotation, find a package in which you can put him on the field. I have a feeling that he'll probably play pretty well.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. I know there's been some people having some problems uploading their playlist. So if it's not working on your podcast app, please just go check out the YouTube channel. I know it's going to be up there every day. We're working to get it fixed on the podcast end. And if you have issues, please let one of us know. My DMs are open. I would love to help you out. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.